At Thanksgiving, my billionaire grandpa stood up with a bruise under his eye and announced he was giving his entire fortune to a stranger. I thought it was a joke until I learned why. What he revealed that night destroyed our family and changed how I saw everything. Watch till the end, because not every stranger is a stranger. Every Thanksgiving at the Holloway mansion was a performance. The marble floors, polished to a mirror's shine. The long oak dining table stretching under golden chandeliers. The perfectly arranged silverware, the soft hum of classical music, and the faint scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles. It wasn't a dinner, it was a statement. I used to love it as a kid, running between my cousins in velvet dresses, sneaking extra desserts from the kitchen while Grandpa pretended not to notice. But now, at 28, walking through those enormous double doors again felt different. Heavy, like stepping into a memory that didn't fit me anymore. "Lily, darling," my mother's voice sang from across the room, brittle as glass. She air-kissed me on both cheeks, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "You're late." "I'm here now," I said, forcing a smile. Her eyes flicked down to my outfit, a simple cream sweater and dark jeans, then back up to my face. "You could have dressed up. It's Thanksgiving, not a book club."
Typical.
I laughed it off, though it stung. "I'll make sure the turkey's impressed." Dad was already talking business with Uncle Raymond in the corner, their voices low and clipped. My cousins scrolled through their phones, pretending not to exist. And in the middle of it all, at the far end of the table, sat Grandpa Henry Holloway, the man who built an empire out of nothing. He was 91 now, thinner than I remembered, his once commanding frame softened by age. But those eyes, sharp, blue, calculating, still saw everything. "Lily," he called, voice gravelly but warm. "Come here, sweetheart." When I leaned down to hug him, I noticed something, a faint bruise, dark and purplish, shadowing his left eye. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice catching. "What happened?" He smiled faintly. "Oh, nothing. Just life reminding me I'm still alive." But his hand, when it brushed mine, was trembling. Something about the way everyone ignored it, how not a single person in that glittering room dared to ask, sent a chill crawling up my spine. Dinner began with forced laughter, the kind that never reached anyone's eyes. My mother passed the cranberry sauce like it was currency. My uncle made another joke about kids these days. My father reminded everyone that our family business, Holloway Holdings, had just acquired a new tech company. And Grandpa? He just sat there quietly, watching us like a man seeing ghosts. When dessert arrived, pumpkin pie, perfectly sliced, he tapped his glass gently with a spoon. The sound echoed through the room like a warning bell. "Everyone," he said, rising slowly to his feet, "before we eat dessert, I have something important to say." A hush fell instantly. Even the servants paused. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he continued, "about life, about legacy, about the kind of people we become when no one's watching." His voice cracked slightly, and I realized something. My fortune, the Holloway name, it's poisoned us. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, this isn't the time." Grandpa raised a hand. "It's exactly the time." The tension was thick enough to choke on. He took a deep breath, then said the words that would rip our family apart. "I'm giving my entire estate, everything I own, to someone outside this family." At first, I thought I'd misheard. Then my mother gasped so loudly it echoed. My uncle nearly dropped his fork. Someone muttered, "What?" and someone else whispered, "He's lost it." But Grandpa's expression didn't waver. He just stood there, old and trembling, but resolute, like a man finally unburdening a secret he'd carried for too long. "Dad," my father barked, "this is insane."
To whom? Who are you talking about?
Grandpa set down his glass. "You'll meet her soon enough." Her. My heart stuttered. A woman. The words swirled in my head like smoke as the murmurs turned into chaos. My mother was already clutching her pearls, my uncle pacing furiously, and everyone talking at once. But Grandpa simply sat down again, his expression calm, almost relieved. And that's when I noticed it again, that bruise under his eye. It wasn't fading. It was fresh. And for the first time, I wondered if his decision wasn't just about legacy, but survival. Silence didn't last long. It shattered the moment my Uncle Raymond slammed his hand against the table. "This is madness," he hissed. "You can't just hand over our inheritance to some random woman, Dad." Grandpa didn't flinch. "It's not yours," he said softly. "It never was." The air thickened. I could almost hear the pulse in my ears. My father leaned forward, his jaw tight. "You've worked your whole life to build Holloway Holdings. The least you could do is keep it in the family." Grandpa's eyes moved slowly across the table. "And look what that's done to the family." His gaze lingered on each of us, my mother's perfectly painted mask of outrage, Uncle Raymond's greedy glare, my cousins whispering like vultures. Then his eyes stopped on me. For a moment, something flickered there, sorrow, maybe, or guilt. He turned to the butler. "Samuel, please bring her in." Her. The word hit like an echo from part one. The room collectively inhaled. Even the candles seemed to flicker in anticipation. And then the doors opened. A woman stepped in. She looked to be in her early 40s, striking, elegant in a simple black dress. Her hair was dark, tied neatly at the nape of her neck. She walked with quiet confidence, the kind that made you notice her without meaning to. No jewelry. No designer label. Just calm, collected grace. "Everyone," Grandpa said, his tone trembling but proud, "this is Elena Ward." My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Who?" she demanded. Grandpa didn't answer. Instead, Elena smiled politely, as though walking into a room filled with daggers was nothing new to her. "Good evening," she said softly. Her voice was warm but firm. "Mr. Holloway thought it was time you met me." Uncle Raymond scoffed. "And who exactly are you to my father?" She didn't answer immediately, just glanced at Grandpa, who gave a faint nod. Then she said it, the words that would detonate the evening entirely. "I'm the rightful heir to his estate." The room exploded. "You've lost your mind," my mother screamed. "This is some kind of scam." Raymond barked. "Dad, she's lying to you," my father snapped. Grandpa lifted a hand weakly. "Enough." But they didn't stop. I just sat there, stunned, staring at this woman, Elena, as she calmly endured their fury. Her hands stayed folded in front of her. She didn't flinch. Something about her composure unnerved me. She didn't look like someone trying to steal anything. She looked certain. When the shouting finally died down, Grandpa spoke again. "I met Elena many years ago," he said quietly. "Long before any of you were born. And she's been part of my life ever since, though none of you knew it." My father's voice shook with disbelief. "What are you saying? That you've been keeping a mistress all this time?" Grandpa's lips twitched in a ghost of a smile. "Not a mistress." Elena's eyes softened. "I'm his daughter." You could have heard a pin drop. The sound of the fireplace crackling suddenly felt deafening. "She's what?" my mother whispered. "She's lying." Uncle Raymond spat. But Grandpa didn't deny it. "I made mistakes," he said, voice breaking slightly. "When I was younger, I had an affair. Elena's mother was part of that life I never wanted to admit existed. The one before I became Henry Holloway, the man the world knows." He took a deep breath. "I turned my back on them. I convinced myself it was for the best, for my reputation, for this family's name. But I've carried that guilt for 50 years. I won't die with it." Elena's eyes glistened, though she didn't cry. "He reached out to me 3 years ago," she said quietly. "We've been rebuilding what we lost." My heart pounded. 3 years? I looked around. Every face in the room was pale with disbelief. Uncle Raymond shook his head. "This is insane. She could be anyone. We'll demand proof." "You'll have it," Grandpa said. "Every document, every test, everything." but my mind is made up. She will inherit everything. My company, my assets, this house. Over your own blood? My mother whispered, trembling with fury. Grandpa's voice dropped to a whisper. She is my blood. Then his voice faltered again. He touched the bruise under his eye, that same one I'd noticed earlier, and for a brief moment, something flickered across Elena's face. A flash of guilt? Or pain? I couldn't tell, but I saw it. And I knew there was more to this than just family secrets, because when she looked at him, there was affection but also fear. Something about the bruise, the secrecy, the sudden revelation. It didn't add up. And as my family descended into chaos, lawyers mentioned, inheritances threatened, reputations gasped for, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about money or guilt. It was about protection. And that night, as everyone argued and screamed, Grandpa leaned close to me, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily, he said, gripping my hand, promise me you'll keep your eyes open. Things aren't what they seem. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would. Soon. Because within days he'd be gone, and the truth he tried to warn me about would turn all of us against each other. The mansion was quiet the next morning, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is listening. Thanksgiving had ended in fragments. My uncle had stormed out, slamming the door so hard the chandelier rattled. My mother had locked herself in the guest suite, crying more from humiliation than heartbreak. Dad stayed up arguing with Grandpa's lawyer until midnight. And me? I barely slept. I kept replaying the night in my head. Elena's calm face, Grandpa's trembling hands, and that bruise that looked more like a blow than an accident. When I finally stepped out of my room the next morning, I found her, Elena, standing in the garden, just beyond the glass doors, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. The November air was sharp, crisp. She was staring at the pond, still as a painting. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to avoid her altogether. But something about the way Grandpa had said, keep your eyes open, wouldn't let me. I pushed open the door. Couldn't sleep either? I asked softly. She turned, and for a moment, I saw the exhaustion etched across her face. Deep, human, not calculated. It's been a long night, she said. We stood there in silence, watching the wind ripple the water. Finally, I asked, is it true? Everything he said. She nodded once. Yes. There was no hesitation in her voice. That calm certainty again. I didn't come here for his money, she added after a pause. I came because he wanted to make things right before it was too late. Then why now? I asked. After all these years? Her gaze drifted back to the pond. Because someone tried to stop him. The words hit like a slap. I froze. What do you mean? She looked at me then, really looked. You saw the bruise, didn't you? I swallowed hard. Yes. It wasn't a fall, she said quietly. It was a warning. My pulse spiked. From who? Her lips pressed together. He didn't say.
But he told me not to come last night.
Said it wasn't safe. I came anyway. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the weather. Why would anyone hurt him? I asked. Because he was changing his will, she replied simply. We stood there in that fragile silence until the door behind us opened. My father's voice cut through like a blade. Lily inside.
Now.
I turned. He was standing in the doorway, face tight, phone in hand. His gaze flicked to Elena. You should leave before things get worse for you. Elena's tone didn't waver. I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Holloway. My father's expression hardened. You've caused enough trouble already. She's not the one who caused this. I blurted before I could stop myself. His eyes snapped to mine, sharp and cold. You have no idea what's going on here, Lily. Then tell me, I said. Because all I see is a bruise and a family pretending it didn't happen. His jaw tightened the way it always did when he was fighting to stay in control. This is not your concern. He turned and walked away, muttering something into his phone, something that sounded like lawyers, damage control, and silence her. That afternoon, Grandpa stayed in his study with the door closed. By evening, Samuel the butler knocked on my door. "Miss Lily," he said, voice heavy, "your grandfather would like to see you." When I entered, the room smelled of oak and old books. The fire crackled softly. Grandpa sat behind his desk, looking smaller somehow, his skin pale, his breath shallow. "Close the door," he said. I did. He gestured for me to sit. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you, but you must listen carefully." I leaned forward, heart thudding. "There are people in this family," he said slowly, "who care more about money than blood. I've made mistakes. I've created monsters without realizing it. When I decided to change the will, I thought the worst that would happen was anger. I didn't expect." He trailed off, eyes flicking toward the window. "Did someone hurt you?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened a drawer and took out an envelope. My name was written on it, his handwriting shaky but familiar. "Whatever happens," he said, "you keep this safe. Don't open it until you have to." "Grandpa, what's going on?" He smiled faintly, sadness swimming in his eyes. "You always saw things others didn't. Promise me you'll protect the truth, no matter what it costs." I nodded slowly. "I promise." He squeezed my hand, that same trembling hand I'd held the night before. Then he whispered, "Tell Elena, I'm sorry. That was the last conversation we ever had." Because the next morning, Samuel found him, slumped over his desk, the fire still burning low. The coroner called it natural causes. But when I saw him, when I saw the faint bruise on his neck, not just his face, I knew. It wasn't natural. Something had happened. And someone in that house wanted it buried. The funeral came quickly. My father handled everything, efficiently and coldly. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following week. But I couldn't stop thinking about that envelope in my drawer. Every night, I'd take it out, trace my name across the paper, and wonder what truth it held inside. And every morning, I'd see Elena outside again, quiet, patient, waiting for something. Waiting for me. Because whether I liked it or not, we were both tied to him now, by blood, by loss, and by the secrets he left behind. That night, I stood at my window, staring down at the dim lights of the mansion. Then I whispered to myself, "Okay, Grandpa, I'll keep my eyes open." And somewhere deep down, I already knew the real Thanksgiving story hadn't ended with his death. It had just begun. Grief has a strange way of disguising itself. In our house, it came dressed as silence. No one cried at the funeral. Not my father, not my mother, not even Uncle Raymond, who pretended to dab his eyes with a handkerchief while already whispering to the lawyer. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath, heavy, unspoken, waiting. Elena stood at the back of the chapel alone. No one dared approach her. People whispered, but she didn't react. Her black coat looked almost too plain against the backdrop of my family's tailored morning suits. When the service ended, she caught my eye. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she nodded, a quiet, knowing gesture, as if to say, "I know you see it too." The days that followed blurred together. Lawyers came and went. My father spent most of his time in the study, managing affairs. My mother drank more than usual. Uncle Raymond stayed glued to the phone, speaking in low tones about the transition and market confidence. But nobody talked about the bruise. Nobody talked about how fast the death certificate was signed, or how the coroner refused to answer questions. And no one, absolutely no one, mentioned the envelope Grandpa had given me. It sat in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, sealed, waiting. Every time I opened that drawer, my fingers hovered over it. But his words echoed in my mind. "Don't open it until you have to." And I wasn't sure if that moment had arrived yet. One afternoon, 3 days before the will reading, I was in Grandpa's study. The lawyers had already removed most of the official documents, but I'd asked Samuel, our loyal old butler, to let me in. I just want to sit for a bit, I told him. He gave me a small nod. Take your time, Miss Lily. When he left, I closed the door behind him and turned the key. The room still smelled like him. Faint tobacco, leather, and old wood polish. His glasses were still on the desk. A single cup of cold tea sat beside them, as if he might return any moment to take another sip. I ran my fingers along the edge of the desk, my eyes scanning for something. I didn't even know what. Then I noticed it. A small scratch beneath the desk drawer, like a mark left from something being forced open. Curious, I crouched down, feeling along the underside. My fingertips brushed against something metallic, a latch. I pressed it gently, and with a soft click, a hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook. I pulled it out, my heart pounding. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed. His handwriting filled every line, sharp, deliberate. I flipped through the first few pages. Old business notes, meeting times, numbers. But then the entries changed. Dates, names, and one word that kept repeating over and over. Elena. I sat down, the notebook trembling in my hands. He had written about her for months, maybe years. Notes about meeting her, about trying to repair what he'd broken. But then, halfway through, the tone shifted. She doesn't trust me fully. I can't blame her. The family won't understand. But I fear someone already knows about her. Raymond has been asking questions about my estate. He knows something is changing. Someone followed me home today. A black car. I didn't recognize the driver. I stopped breathing for a moment. Then another entry, dated just a few days before Thanksgiving. They warned me to stop. Said there would be consequences if I changed the will. I thought they were bluffing. But now I think I was wrong. Elena insists I stay quiet. She's afraid too. But the truth must come out, even if it costs me everything. My stomach twisted. Someone in my family had threatened him, and he'd been too afraid to say who. I turned the last page. There was one more note, shorter, shakier than the rest. If anything happens to me, Lily will know what to do. I trust her to finish what I couldn't. A knock startled me so hard I almost dropped the notebook. I shoved it back into the compartment and straightened up just as my father opened the door. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his tone sharp. "I was just looking around," I said carefully. He stepped inside, scanning the room. "This is a bad time to dwell on the past. Focus on moving forward." "With what?" I asked. "You mean pretending none of this happened?" His jaw tightened. "Your grandfather's decisions were his own. Don't make them your burden." "Did you know about Elena?" I pressed. He froze just for a second, but I saw it. That flicker of something behind his eyes. Then he smiled tightly. "We'll discuss this after the will reading." And he left before I could say another word. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The house felt alive, the kind of alive that hums just beneath your skin, like you're being watched. I got up, slipped on my sweater, and crept down the hallway. The study was dark, but I saw light coming from under the library door. Voices. Low. Whispering. I pressed my ear to the wood. "She's still asking questions." A man's voice said, "My father's." "Then handle it," another voice replied, cold, deliberate. "Uncle Raymond." "What about Elena?" "We'll take care of her after the will is finalized. No loose ends." My breath caught in my throat. Take care of her. Loose ends. They weren't just angry. They were planning something. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned, too late. Samuel stood there, his eyes wide. "Miss Lily," he whispered, holding a finger to his lips. "Not here." He took my arm gently and led me away from the door. When we were far enough, he whispered, "Whatever you do, don't confront them yet. You're not safe." My heart pounded. "Samuel, what are they planning?" He hesitated. "Your grandfather wasn't the only one who kept secrets in this house." That night, I locked my door and sat on the bed clutching the envelope again. Whatever was inside it, I finally knew it was time. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter. Just one page. In his trembling handwriting, my grandfather had written, "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Trust no one in this family, except the one you fear the most. The truth is buried where the light never reaches." Start where it all began. The old summer house. You'll find what they tried to destroy. The old summer house. The place we hadn't visited since I was a child. Miles away, forgotten, abandoned. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. Because whatever my family was hiding, it started there. And I was done living in silence. The drive to the old summer house felt like traveling backward through time. Every mile I drove peeled away another layer of the life I thought I understood. The morning fog hugged the road, and the trees leaned close, tall, silent witnesses to something long buried. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I kept hearing his voice in my head. Trust no one in this family, except the one you fear the most. Those words echoed like a riddle I couldn't solve. Who did I fear the most? My father? My uncle? Or was he warning me about someone else entirely? By the time I reached the property, the sun was rising behind a thin veil of mist. The house stood at the end of a gravel drive, exactly as I remembered, a crumbling shell of weathered wood and creeping ivy. It used to be filled with laughter, summer dinners, and my grandfather teaching me how to catch fireflies. Now it looked like the ghost of those memories. The air smelled of salt and pine. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. I hesitated before stepping inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the floorboards groaned beneath my weight. Dust motes swirled through beams of pale morning light. Every step stirred up the scent of time, stale paper, old wood, forgotten moments. I ran my fingers along the cracked wallpaper, tracing the outline of a faded photograph that had once hung there. A family portrait, maybe. A family that looked whole. But we weren't whole anymore. I started in the study. The furniture was still there. The same oak desk, though warped and brittle now. The drawers were jammed from years of neglect. I pulled one open, then another, finding nothing but old papers, pens, and a few moth-eaten notebooks. It wasn't until I lifted the corner of the rug that I saw it, a square outline in the wooden floor, barely visible. A trapdoor. I knelt down, brushing off the dust. The metal ring handle was rusted, but it turned with a reluctant creak. The smell that rose up was sharp, damp, old air that hadn't been disturbed in decades. I hesitated, heart pounding, then grabbed the flashlight from my bag and shone it down. Wooden steps led into darkness. My breath came shallow as I descended. The steps moaned beneath me. At the bottom was a small cellar, cold, windowless, the air thick with the weight of old secrets. There were boxes stacked against one wall. I pulled one open. It was full of ledgers, photographs, letters. Then I saw her name again. Elena. The letters were bundled together with a ribbon, her handwriting looping gracefully across the envelopes. I sat cross-legged on the floor, flashlight balanced beside me, and began to read. July 17th. You said they wouldn't find out, but they know. I saw Raymond outside my clinic again. He pretends he's there for charity, but I can tell he's watching me. Another letter. August 2nd. Your family won't let this go. You think they'll forgive you for what you're doing, but they won't. Please, stop before it's too late. And another, dated November 10th, less than 2 weeks before his death. If anything happens to you, I'll tell her. She deserves to know who I am and what really happened all those years ago. She has your courage. I can see it in her eyes. I froze. Tell her.
Me. She was talking about me.
My mind was spinning. Elena wasn't just some outsider or a business partner. She was someone deeply connected to my family. Then, in the corner of the cellar, I noticed a small safe, the kind my grandfather used for private documents. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I remembered the numbers he always used for locks, his wedding anniversary, my birthday, his military ID. I tried them one by one. When I entered the third code, there was a soft click. Inside were several files and a small flash drive. The files were labeled McKenna Trust Holdings, Confidential. Inheritance Revisions. DNA Test Results. I opened the last one first. My eyes skimmed the page, then stopped cold. Subject: Lily McKenna. Relation to Subject B: Elena Cortez. Biological match: 99.8%. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the papers. Elena. Elena was my mother. I sat there for what felt like hours, the truth unraveling around me like smoke. My grandfather had known. He had tried to tell me in his own way, to protect me, even in death. And my father, my uncle, they must have known too. Because if Elena was my mother, that meant my entire life was built on a lie. When I finally climbed out of the cellar, the world felt different. The air was colder, the silence louder. I sat on the porch steps, staring at the sea beyond the cliffs. The wind whipped my hair into my face, and I let the tears come, the kind that burn, not from sadness, but from betrayal. All those years I'd felt something missing. A distance. A question I couldn't name.
Now I knew why.
My father had kept me from her. My uncle had buried the truth with my grandfather. And they'd killed him to keep it quiet. I drove back that night with one goal burning in my chest. Not rage, not vengeance, but clarity. I wasn't going to destroy them. I was going to expose them. With the flash drive in my bag and my grandfather's letter folded in my pocket, I finally had the truth they'd tried so hard to bury. But what I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known, was that they were already one step ahead of me. Because when I got home, the lights were already on, and someone was waiting for me in the dark. When I pulled into the driveway that night, the house looked different. Not darker, just colder. Every window was lit, but the light felt sterile, like it didn't belong to us anymore. My stomach twisted. I hadn't told anyone I'd gone to the summer house. No one. So, why were the lights on? I stepped out of the car quietly, clutching my bag close. My grandfather's flash drive felt heavy inside, almost pulsing with the truth it held. As I approached the door, the faint hum of voices drifted through the air, low, controlled, masculine. My father, and my Uncle Raymond, the same two men who'd sworn they'd loved my grandfather like a father. The same two men who now had everything to lose. The foyer was warm, glowing with the scent of firewood and the faint trace of my mother's perfume. Except my mother wasn't supposed to be here. Then I saw her coat on the rack. My breath hitched. She's here. I took a step forward, careful to keep my shoes quiet on the marble. From the sitting room, I heard my uncle's voice, deep, impatient. She's digging too deep. If she finds the files. She won't. My father cut in sharply. I made sure of it. Samuel said she's been keeping to herself since the funeral. She went somewhere today, Raymond said. The tracker in her car shows she drove out of town.
Tracker.
My skin went cold. They'd been watching me. I pressed closer to the doorway, every instinct screaming at me to run, yet something stronger held me still. Then what about Elena? My uncle asked. She's still here, whispering in everyone's ear. She'll ruin everything. She won't ruin anything, my father snapped. She won't be around long enough. A silence followed, heavy, sharp. Then Raymond said quietly, You mean like him? My father didn't answer.
But I didn't need him to.
Because that silence, that terrible, loaded silence, was all the confession I needed. They'd done it. They'd hurt Grandpa. And they were planning to do the same to Elena. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun, heart racing. Elena stood there. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red, but her posture was steady, almost defiant. She lifted a finger to her lips, motioning for silence. Then she whispered, You shouldn't have come back here. I found out, I whispered back. The letters. The test results. You're my... Her eyes softened, just for a moment. We'll talk later. But right now, you need to get out before they see you. No, I said. I'm not leaving you. Not again. Her gaze darted toward the sitting room. You don't understand. They're not going to stop this time. Then let's stop them first. Before she could reply, my father's voice echoed from behind the doorway. Lily. The sound of my name froze us both. I stepped out slowly, forcing my face calm. Hey, Dad. His expression faltered for half a second, the faintest flicker of guilt, maybe surprise, before he masked it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You scared us, he said smoothly. Where have you been? Just out, I said. Needed some air. Raymond watched me with that calculating stare I'd always hated. You went to the summer house, didn't you? I blinked, feigning confusion. What? He smirked. You really think we don't know? Elena stepped forward then, her voice low but steady. Leave her out of this, Raymond. My father's gaze snapped toward her, full of venom. You don't get to speak here. You shouldn't have come back at all. And yet here I am, she said softly. You can't hide what you did anymore. The tension in the room crackled like static. I looked at him, the man I'd called Dad my entire life, and I didn't recognize him anymore. You knew, I said quietly. You knew who she was. You knew she was my mother. He hesitated, just long enough to tell me I was right. I did what I had to do, he said finally. You were better off without her. Better off being lied to? He took a step closer. Better off not knowing how she destroyed this family. She didn't destroy it, I said, voice trembling. You did. The air shifted. Raymond's hand twitched near his pocket, and I saw the glint of something metallic. Elena's eyes darted to it instantly. Lily. But before she could finish, the front door burst open. Samuel, loyal, quiet Samuel, stood there, holding a phone and shaking. The police are on their way, he said. I called them. I saw what you did, Mr. Holloway. I saw everything. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Raymond lunged. There was a crash, the sound of glass shattering, a shout, the heavy thud of a struggle. Elena grabbed my arm. Go. I stumbled backward, my bag slipping open, papers scattering across the floor. The flash drive slid out, landing near the fireplace. Raymond's eyes caught it. And then I knew the truth was no longer safe in my hands. He dove for it, but I was faster. I kicked it under the sofa, adrenaline surging through me. Enough, my father shouted. The chaos froze. He was breathing hard, eyes wild, but his voice was eerily calm when he said, Do you think anyone will believe you, Lily? You have no proof. Just a story. I met his stare and said quietly, Then I'll give them one. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Blue lights flickered through the windows. For a long, suspended second, no one breathed. Then my father straightened his tie and said, almost politely, You just destroyed your family, Lily. I took a step toward him, voice shaking but strong.
No, Dad.
You did that years ago. When the police entered, the first thing they saw was the bruise on Elena's arm, the same kind Grandpa had under his eye. Raymond tried to run. My father didn't. He just stood there, silent, as they cuffed him and led him out into the cold night. And through it all, I didn't cry. Not until he was gone. Later, when the house was quiet again, Elena and I sat by the dying fire. I could still smell the faint trace of smoke and cedar. She reached for my hand, tentative, trembling. I wanted to tell you, she said, but he wouldn't let me. He said it was for your own good. I shook my head, tears slipping down. I spent my whole life feeling like something was missing. Turns out it was you. She smiled sadly. I'm here now. I squeezed her hand. And this time, no one's taking you away. That night, I opened my grandfather's letter again. I read it slowly, by the soft light of the fire. Truth will always cost something, Lily, but it's the only thing worth paying for. For the first time, I understood what he meant. The house was quiet again, eerily so. Police tape crisscrossed the grand foyer, cutting through chandeliers and paintings like scars. Every echo inside those marble halls carried ghosts, his voice, his laugh, his warnings. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in that mansion. I felt awake. It had been 3 weeks since that night. My father and uncle were both in custody, charged with fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. The prosecutors said more charges might come once they went through the files. The estate had been temporarily frozen. Reporters camped outside the gates like vultures. Everyone wanted to know how the perfect McKenna family had fallen apart overnight. But for me, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about the truth. And the truth was finally clawing its way to the surface. I sat at Grandpa's old desk, sunlight spilling across stacks of documents. Elena stood beside me, scanning through ledgers with a quiet focus that reminded me of him. She'd moved into the guest room after the police left. At first, it felt strange, like living with a stranger who was somehow a part of me. But now, the silence between us was beginning to fill with something new. Understanding. Sometimes we'd sit together in the evenings, just talking about the past, about the life she'd been forced to leave behind. She told me how she met my grandfather years ago when she worked at one of his charitable clinics. How she fell in love with my father, the man who later betrayed them both. How he'd chosen power over love. And how Grandpa had tried to protect her and me. One afternoon, as we sifted through the files from the flash drive, Elena froze. "Lily," she said softly, "you need to see this." She turned the laptop toward me. It was a series of documents, offshore accounts, shell companies, and coded transactions, all linked to McKenna Holdings. The amounts were staggering. Millions funneled into hidden projects. At the bottom of one file was a signature I knew too well. Robert Halloway, my father. And beneath his, another name, Raymond Halloway. They'd been siphoning money from Grandpa's charitable foundation for years, disguising it as development grants. That was why Grandpa wanted to rewrite his will. He'd discovered their scheme. He'd planned to expose them and leave everything to the one person he trusted to continue his work, Elena. I sat back, my chest tight. He knew they'd come after him. Elena nodded. That's why he left you the letter. He wanted you to have a choice, to decide what kind of legacy this family would leave. I looked at her, the weight of it all pressing on me. Then we finished what he started. Over the next week, I worked with the investigators, handing over every file, every document, every scrap of proof. The press swarmed, but I stayed silent. I wasn't ready to speak, not until I could do it on my own terms. When the district attorney called to say there would be a full public hearing, I knew this was it, the moment to finally set the record straight. I wore black that day, not for mourning, but for strength. The courtroom buzzed with noise as the case began. My father sat across from me, pale, expressionless. Raymond refused to look my way. When the prosecutor handed me the flash drive and asked, "Ms. Halloway, do you recognize this device?" I said clearly, yes. It belonged to my grandfather. He gave it to me before he died. Then I told them everything. The bruises, the threats, the envelope. The night they silenced him. Every word trembled out of me, but not from fear, from release. Because each truth spoken was a chain broken. When I stepped down from the witness stand, Elena reached for my hand. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she smiled. "You did it," she whispered. "He'd be proud." I shook my head, my voice soft but sure. We did it. 2 months later, the verdict came. Both men were found guilty.
Fraud.
Conspiracy. Manslaughter. The courtroom erupted in whispers, but I didn't celebrate. I just closed my eyes and let the weight lift, slow, quiet, like dust leaving sunlight. Afterward, I visited my grandfather's grave. The wind was cold, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. I knelt beside the headstone, running my fingers along the carved letters. "Truth will always cost something," I murmured. "You were right." I took out the pocket watch he'd left me, the one that had stopped ticking the night he died. When I wound it gently, it started again.
Tick, tick, tick.
A second chance. Elena stood a few steps behind me. "We can leave now if you're ready," she said. I looked back at the house in the distance, the house that once defined me. Now it was just walls, memories, a place that used to hold lies. "I think I am," I said. We walked away together, the sound of gravel crunching under our feet. The world felt wide again, like something I could finally breathe in without fear. A few months later, the foundation reopened under a new name, the William McKenna Truth Initiative. Its mission was simple: to protect whistleblowers, expose corruption, and help families torn apart by greed. Grandpa's picture hung in the lobby, smiling that quiet, knowing smile. Below, it was a plaque that read, "For those brave enough to tell the truth, no matter the cost." Every time I walked past it, I felt his presence beside me. And for the first time since that Thanksgiving, I didn't feel haunted. I felt whole. 6 months had passed since the trial, yet some mornings, it still felt like I was waking up in the mansion, trapped under its weight of secrets and whispers. Except now, the air was lighter. The silence was kind. I'd moved into a small house by the coast, a place Grandpa once took me as a child. I still remembered the way he'd said, "The sea never lies, Lily. It shows you everything you try to hide." I understood that now. Truth had a tide. It came for you, sooner or later, no matter how long you tried to keep it back. Elena came by every Sunday. We'd make tea, sit on the porch, and watch the gulls dive through the salt-heavy air. Sometimes we talked about the past, not the pain of it, but the strange beauty that came from surviving it. Other times we didn't need words at all. It was enough to sit beside her, knowing we'd both lost and found something precious. She was more than my mother now. She was proof that love, once buried, could grow again. The foundation had taken off faster than we expected. People began sending letters, stories of families silenced by greed, employees punished for honesty, daughters who'd lost fathers to secrets. Every story reminded me of ours. Every voice was another wound healing. And I could almost hear Grandpa's voice saying, "Make something good out of it, Lily. That's how you win." One afternoon, I was sorting through a donation box when I found something I hadn't seen in years, an old photograph. It was from one of our early Thanksgivings. I was little, sitting on Grandpa's knee, holding a piece of pumpkin pie. My father and uncle stood behind us, all smiles, the perfect picture of a perfect family. But as I looked closer, I noticed something I'd never seen before. Grandpa's hand wasn't resting on the table like I'd thought. He was holding Elena's hand, hidden under the edge of the tablecloth. A silent truth, caught in a photograph. I smiled through my tears. Even back then, he'd been protecting her.
Protecting me.
That Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner for the first time in my life. Not in the mansion. That place belonged to the past. We held it here, in my little home by the sea. The air smelled of cinnamon, sage, and roasted apples. Elena laughed while carving the turkey, and our small group of volunteers filled the room with warmth and clinking glasses. It wasn't grand or luxurious. It was real. When everyone left and the house fell quiet again, I stepped out to the porch, a blanket around my shoulders. The sky was painted in amber and violet, the sea whispering softly below. And I thought of him.
His laugh.
His warning. His unshakable belief that truth, even when painful, was sacred. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the pocket watch. It still ticked, steady, unbroken. I whispered into the wind. "You were right, Grandpa. The truth did cost me everything. But it gave me more than I ever lost." Because truth had taken away my family name, but it had given me something better, my soul back. That night, I wrote the final line for the Foundation's new campaign letter. This is for the ones who refuse to be silenced, the ones who speak even when their voices shake. Because truth isn't what breaks us. It's what sets us free. I signed it simply. Lily Cortez Holloway. Both names. Both legacies. Whole at last. Thanksgiving will always remind me of the night my world fell apart, and the night it began again. I learned that truth doesn't destroy love, lies do. That silence isn't peace, it's prison. And that sometimes the family you rebuild from truth is stronger than the one you were born into. So if you're holding a truth inside you, one that scares you, one that feels too heavy to speak, remember this. The truth will hurt, but living without it will hurt forever.
Speak it anyway.
Because freedom always starts with honesty.
If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen play out?